When was the last time you truly threw yourself into a game, knowing almost nothing about it? This experience, which once was commonplace, has become increasingly rare with the rise of the internet, its social networks, and videos offering thousands of hours and lines of content on just about any game imaginable. I did this recently with Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, and I know it's not some obscure indie game or anything like that, but it had been a while since I jumped into a game without looking at reviews, reading comments, checking its length, or even recording my gameplay for a future video review. And this experience only reinforced something I already believed. Much of the discourse that currently exists online about certain games happens precisely because this kind of blind, or at least almost blind playthrough is becoming a rarity. Since extreme opinions, whether positive or negative, get far more clicks than neutrality or pragmatism, toxic positivity or toxic negativity ends up affecting how many people perceive certain games. And this doesn't happen by accident. Now, diverging opinions aren't inherently a bad thing. On the contrary, they should be encouraged. The problem lies in how algorithms work. And I'll use Mario Kart World as an example since it's a recent title, but the same principle applies to virtually any other game or franchise you can think of. If you search for reasons why it's good, you find countless examples praising its new open world format with comments about improved gameplay and how much better it looks. But if you look for videos showing the other side of the coin, you find no shortage of results there either. You see videos explaining how the open world format is flawed, how the gameplay has gotten worse, and how the graphical leap wasn't all that impressive. And it's possible that both opinions are well founded in each person's personal experience. But YouTube and other internet algorithms reward clickbait and extremism. And many people just do a quick search, scanning titles and thumbnails to get a general idea. And inevitably, when you finally play the game, your experience will be colored by the positivity or negativity you've consumed. How different would your playthrough have been if you hadn't read those opinions first? We live in an age of information overload, where it's nearly impossible to escape others' opinions before forming your own. But this is a relatively recent thing. If you've been playing video games since the 80s or early 90s, you remember how difficult it was to get much information about them. Even if you watched a TV show about video games or bought magazines, the information was still limited. On TV shows constrained by broadcast schedules, segments were just a few minutes long, and programs had to cover multiple games within a tight time frame. The same was true for magazines. Depending on the game, it might only get a small blurb in the corner of a page with a very direct assessment and a score from the writer. And of course, not everyone watched those shows or bought the magazines, not to mention that the content wasn't as globalized and ever-present as it is today. Often you would buy or rent a game simply because you liked the cover art or because the guy from the rental store or a friend from school mentioned something about it. You didn't know how many hours the game would last. Metacritic didn't exist yet, and neither did the debate about whether certain games were woke or not. The only real controversy was about violence. Maybe some games wouldn't be approved by parents or would even get banned in the country, which of course only made you want to play them more. Naturally, everything seems better through the lens of nostalgia. Many times, whether through ignorance or a lack of information, we ended up buying or renting bad games and getting stuck with them. That blind dive wasn't always so magical, but it's not just a nostalgic fantasy either. And it's very likely that because of this, you have a soft spot for some obscure game from decades ago, or maybe you even ventured into a revolutionary AAA title knowing almost nothing about it. But today, that blind dive into a game that's unknown to you has become increasingly rare. That's exactly why my experience with The Lost Legacy stood out so much. Playing The Lost Legacy knowing as little as possible and without looking up guides certainly made me take longer than usual to finish the campaign. I also came nowhere close to getting or even wanting to get all the trophies. Anything I managed to unlock was just a bonus. But there was a huge advantage to all this. I didn't know what to expect. Of course, having played Uncharted 4, I knew the mechanics would be somewhat similar, and I had read that this game had a more open world section, but that's where my knowledge ended. I also wasn't recording gameplay for a review, so I didn't have to worry about playing well, maintaining continuity, or the hassle of exporting and organizing everything later. I didn't even have to play it in English, which isn't my native language. This detachment gave me the freedom to explore however I wanted. For instance, I decided to find all the tokens to get the Queen's Ruby, a task that tested my patience and took up more hours than I imagined. I knew I had already missed some treasures and wasn't going to start over to collect them all, but I wanted to explore more of that semi-open world. And the story itself was a complete unknown. Unlike The Last of Us Part 2, where those golf swings are basically public knowledge, and I say this without even having played the second game yet, here I had no idea what was coming. Would there be a betrayal? Would they become a couple? Would I play as Nadine or just Chloe? Would they both survive until the end? Well, the answer is play it yourself and find out. But I already know what many of you are going to say. Look at all the problems modern games have, not to mention the price hikes. I have to know as much as possible before I buy, especially if it's a new release. And logically, this line of thinking makes perfect sense, especially if you pre-order games or play a lot of new releases, which isn't my case. It's a wise move to try and avoid disasters, like the recent case of Mind's Eye and so many other examples that are still fresh in our memory. Or even take the case of Mario Kart World and its $80 price tag. With games becoming more and more expensive, it's hard not to try and gather as much information as possible before making a purchase. Not to mention that knowing almost nothing about a game is getting harder. Even if you aren't actively looking, there's always the risk of accidentally stumbling upon a spoiler in a social media post or a clickbait thumbnail. But it is possible to find a middle ground, at least from time to time, and it might be easier than you think. You almost certainly have a game in your backlog or one on your wish list as on sale that you want to play but haven't watched reviews for, haven't checked its length, or looked up what the best character class is. And if you subscribe to PS Plus or Game Pass, it's even easier to pick something without having to worry about buyer's remorse. Or perhaps you could revisit an old console or take advantage of the big sales on Steam and GOG. And yes, I see the irony of making a video about content consumption while running a YouTube channel. But the point isn't to watch less or to quit watching videos entirely. It's about choosing your battles. Let certain games surprise you, and only then jump into videos enjoying the discussions after you've played. The experience of playing a game without knowing if it's loved or hated, long or short, or where the story is headed can help you find a new favorite, or at the very least, spend some great hours just playing something, even if it's a AAA title. Now, I'm not advocating that you should always play this way, especially with new releases. But making a seasonal habit of playing something without knowing the consensus and focusing entirely on your own personal experience might just reignite your passion for video games or help you discover and become fan of franchises you never would have tried if you had relied on reviews or recommendations. I know the saying is knowledge will set you free, but sometimes the opposite might be what's needed. Perhaps a little ignorance about your next game is exactly what you need. But that doesn't count for my channel, so make sure to still watch my videos. I mean, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.